And our fabulous presenter today is Ashley Zeckman. Ashley, take it away. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. How is everybody feeling today is my first question. All right. Awake? Yeah? Okay, awesome. So, as he just mentioned, we're going to be talking about the evolution of influence and rethinking what does influence mean? What are influencers? How do we work with them? How do the most successful brands work with them? And again, I know it's the morning after B2B After Dark, but I do want this to be something that we all participate in, so let's go. So I want to start by talking about you guys, right? We've had 1.5-ish days of learning so far, and as a B2B marketer, how do you feel like it's going in general? How many think it's going great? You're killing it. All right. It's going all right. Still trying to figure some things out, how to navigate, okay? And then how many of you you're like, I don't want to talk about it. Things are rough right now. Okay, well, we have the first two. That's good. So pre-pandemic, things were already tough, right? We know that it takes about 10 plus pieces of content before a B2B buyer makes a purchasing decision. 68% of consumers say that trust in a brand influences purchasing, yet less than 50% of US consumers trust brands. So it's a little rough out there, right? And then we have the pandemic, right? That completely changes everything. And this is from the report last year from CMI and Marketing Profs. And this is kind of outlining what changes people had to make in response to the pandemic, right? So it was everything from changing your messaging strategy to your website to how you promote things to what the customer journey actually looks like. And we know that trust plays such a critical role in that. So there's some good news, right? There are some upsides. So enter B2B influencer marketing. In terms of some of the benefits, we know that 68% prefer credible content from industry influencers, and there is an 11.7 billion in potential revenue from B2B influencer marketing by the end of 2022. So in the next few months, right? So this is a tactic that has existed for a while, but many of us are still trying to figure out exactly how to implement it or how to scale it. And the good news is also that only 24% of marketers partner with others to expand their reach, right? So we know that there's a ton of opportunity, but not a lot of brands are doing it successfully yet, which means there's room for the rest of us in this room to be able to successfully execute in a marketplace that isn't that crowded. So I just want to give you a very brief history of influence. So all started back in the 1760s when the Queen and the Pope advocate the use of medicine. If you ask Chris Penn, he'll tell you it started earlier, but it was a really complicated story and I didn't feel like I could successfully execute that. So we're gonna go with 1760s. And this was, again, trying to figure out how to get people in their country to start using medicine to help with ailments. And then enter the 1930s, where Coca-Cola hires Santa Claus to be their influencer, to help sell their product. 1990s, I don't know, I'm hoping most of us were alive in the 1990s, and we'll get this reference, but Cindy Crawford made one of the most iconic ads as part of a Pepsi campaign. Early 2000s, I believe 2006 or 2007, the Kardashians hit the scene, right? And here they are still today. And a lot of times when we think of influencers, that's what we think of, but that is 100% not what we're gonna talk about today. And then 2010s, the rise of the social influencer, which is something that we know today to be more common. So let's talk about you again. So, how many of you are currently implementing B2B influencer marketing as a tactic in your organization? So this side of the room only, interesting. Was not expecting that, okay. So again, I guess this question is for this side of the room. How would you rate your program maturity? Do you feel like you're just kind of doing a pilot, proof of concept, potentially? No? Okay, everyone's past that. Okay, got one. Are you in the foundational stage? You're just really kind of getting the engine moving, you're doing it consistently, but you know that you still have some base to build. Okay? How many of you feel like you have a very strategic influencer marketing program? Okay, and then what about advanced? Okay, So it looks like most of us fall into this strategic area, which is good because I am going to try and talk a little bit more about what to do if you're in that situation based on your responses. And just out of curiosity, for those of you that are implementing, why are you pursuing it as a tactic? Did your boss see a TikTok one time and they're like, we have to be doing this. This is critical to our business. Do you feel like it's an emerging tactic and it's something that you want to stay on top of? Have you tested it and seen good results? Or is there, okay, tested it, seen good results, or a completely different reason? Okay, good to know. All right, let's go. So this is from my team at Analytica, and it's just a really good way, I think, of breaking down why you should be partnering with influencers. So obviously, from an awareness perspective, you can generate up to 30 times the amount of awareness and engagement when partnering with influencers. You can also increase demand gen by 5 times. And one of the things we're going to talk about, though, is that an awareness program and a demand gen program are not always the same thing. You might work with different influencers. You might deploy different tactics depending on what you're looking to achieve. Another thing, again, we're trying to do more with less. Budgets are being cut this year for a lot of B2B brands. And so one of the things that you're facing is, how do I create quality content? And how do I increase the amount of content I'm doing in a quality way? Right? Which is a good reason to partner with influencers. It's also very scalable and can lead from an organic perspective, and it can be incredibly cost effective. So if you are working with a handful of influencers to co-create content with you, your actual out-of-pocket costs could be way less significant than if you were looking to hire in-house staff to execute that same content. Right? So that kind of making sure that we're staying in line with budgets, it's a really great way on a budget to create great content. And then obviously trust, which we talked about a little bit earlier. Working with other people that are credible only adds additional credibility to you and your brand. So we're going to go through a few things today around what to do, what not to do, how to best work with influencers, and then I have a few examples in here of some of the programs that we've worked on with our different clients that we've seen success with. So this is a poll that a series of polls that I ran a couple months ago on LinkedIn. And as I was doing this poll, I also tagged the people that I felt were most relevant. So for this one, I actually tagged brands that I know already work with influencers to encourage them to participate in it. And the question was, why do brands partner with influencers? So reach and exposure and building trust were by far the largest ones that people selected. They also added, they add content credibility, which I think is a bit in line with the building audience trust. And then lead generation was only 3%. And I think that's not because people don't want to generate leads. It's just that they're still very early on in their influencer marketing journey and aren't quite sure how to do so yet. So, and one of the things that I think aligns with this is that a lot of us are, again, we're trying to do what we can with what we have, but we're pushing a lot of our content out there and we're saying digital transformation, cloud infrastructure, finance technology, these are things you need to buy. Right? Whereas we need to focus on what our customers really want. And this is what I call the content marketing sweet spot, is this intersection between the things that are important to your brand. So maybe digital transformation is one of the key topics that matters to you. But are people searching for what you want to be selling them? Is there a high demand for it online? And then can you find influencers that have expertise that you can partner with? And this really helps us to hone in on our topics a little bit and move the needle on results more effectively versus trying to be everything to everyone, right? So this is about creating focus with the influencers that we're working with and with our content strategy in general. So a few don'ts. A lot of brands come to us in a bit of a panic sometimes, and they're like, I need to drive engagement on social, I need to generate leads, I need to do this really fast. And their perception of influencer marketing is that of working with the Kardashians, right? Where you see, hey, this, come by Taco Bell, get some great tacos, #ad, right? That's not what we're talking about here. Influencers are not affiliates. And there are opportunities in some cases, and there are some influencers that do affiliate marketing, but at the crux of it, that's not how it works exactly. So, saying generate some leads for us and you'll get this much money doesn't work very well, but it's something that people I think are very interested in because they don't have maybe an in-depth understanding of how to work with these influencers. There's also a lot of times, can you share this piece of content that we wrote? We didn't ask you to be a part of it, You're not included in it, but can you share it for us, for our brand? And this is all part of that shouting things out into the social atmosphere, right? There's also, can you promote this gated asset? It doesn't really align with you, your audience, but hey, we need some help sharing it. Or, it'd be really great for you if you had our CEO on your podcast, right? So I think it can be very tempting to do things like this, but is this how you would approach any other aspect of your content marketing? Probably not, right? So you need to be thoughtful about how you're doing this. So instead, find the different ways to collaborate with influencers. It could be implementing an always-on program where you're consistently working with a smaller group of influencers to co-create content, to have them speak at events, to collaborate in a number of different ways. You could also, if you're just starting out or just looking to start out, you can start simply. It could be that you start with a blog post of here are 20 influencers to follow in supply chain, right? These are experts that you need to follow, that you need to be paying attention to, and it could be sourcing short quotes. You don't have to go big to get started. You just have to be thoughtful about how you're doing it. And ultimately, you need to architect your content just as you would with any other piece of your marketing. So let's say, again, not all of these activities have to include influencers, but many of them could. And how are you going to use these different pieces of content together to ultimately drive to what you want your audience to do? Do you want them to fill out a form? Do you want to have them share this great piece of content you created? What does that look like for you? And architect from the beginning instead of waiting till you are too far down the path. And these other little color-coded boxes are just to indicate how you might promote that piece of content. So it could be you have organic social, paid social, influencers help promote. You could have, if you have a employee advocacy or executive thought leadership program, that could be part of it as well. And honestly, one of these takes you could get it done in like 15 minutes, right? And then you can use this as sort of your guiding force for when you're working with influencers, how to connect it to the rest of your B2B content strategy. So, which channels would you say work best for B2B marketing? And feel free to shout it out. LinkedIn. Slack, LinkedIn, any others? Did you say? I'm not even gonna acknowledge that response. What was that? Yep. Blogs, okay. Well, I got most of those. Sorry, Chris, no Slack. Podcasts are another one that's very... Email, I know, we talked about this yesterday. I did not put it on there. So this is what you typically think of when you think of B2B channels. Excuse me. But one of the things I want us to think about is, where is your audience, right? And so if you would have asked me probably 8 months ago, I would have said Instagram, TikTok, I don't know. Sorry, I got a real bad cough. But things have changed. And as long as your audience is there on those channels, it's a perfectly reasonable tactic to work with influencers that also have reach on those channels. I'm so sorry. Not COVID, I promise. And this is an example of an event we recently ran in partnership with MarketWatch, where we engaged a few influencers to do some Instagram stories. And the amount of people we were able to reach and actually get to register for the event based on these was out of control. So MarketWatch does not have a presence on Instagram. However, the people that they're trying to reach are following influencers that are creating content there. So, and I've found in most of these programs, it's the Instagram stories, not the posts, that tend to generate the best results. Also, within a story, you can put a link. Within a post, you cannot, right? So it makes it much easier to access the content that you're trying to drive people to. Another example is TikTok. And I think Andrew Davis was going on and on about TikTok at Content Marketing World in 2018, 2019. I was like, you're crazy. Like, what is this noise? Now I'm the person who stays up, 3 hours past my bedtime scrolling through it. So I get it. He was right. And our friends at Demandbase, who just happen to be sitting here, have done an incredible job with their TikTok, right? So they're creating a lot of different pieces of content, and they're not just sitting there talking about the product, right? They're talking about what it's like to be a part of this organization. And Caitlin did a great video of an event that they recently attended, and what it was like to be there. And then they also have these really funny pieces of content that you can relate to, right? So it's about making it relatable and challenging some of the things that you know that your audience is struggling with. So again, I think these are still emerging tactics and channels, but there's definitely opportunity to test working with influencers that have a presence on them and seeing if it works for you. And it doesn't work for every brand, but it's worth giving a shot if you feel like your audience there exists on those channels. One of the other things I want to talk about is planning your investment. So I know I said that influencer marketing can be a very cost-effective solution. You can also spend a lot of money very quickly if you're not careful. And the reason for that is if you look at these different types of tactics that you can be implementing with influencers, you have everything from short-form quotes to event speaking to consulting. And if you're not bundling these activities together, you're paying a one-off fee for them. You're also not building a long-term relationship with the influencer, so it can become a bit difficult to rein in those costs and to plan for them appropriately. So I want to give you an example of what it could look like. So we have here the Boston Mob, some of our favorite B2B marketers that live here in Boston. And let's say that they are 3 influencers you want to partner with throughout the year. So here are mini versions of them to indicate how you might partner. So let's say with Chris here, you want to do some short form content, you want to have him write something very detailed, and you want to have him consult on something related to AI, right? If you bundle those activities together, you're able to form, like I said, a longer term relationship with the expert you're trying to work with, and you're also able to properly navigate and manage what those costs are because it's a win-win for both parties. And then you create more predictability for those influencers. Next, I want to talk about finding a shared point of view. One of the things I feel like I say on a daily basis is that the influencers that you work with matter, right? So they need to have that aligned point of view. You also need to understand different types of influencers and the value that they bring to your content marketing strategy. So we have let's say our professional influencer. This is someone who has a fairly large social network. They're well known, they're recognizable, they get good engagement. And those are the people that are recognized, right? So the Ann Hanleys of the world, right? Who are amazing. We also have our up-and-comers who are maybe potentially on that track to becoming a professional influencer, and working with them earlier on when they have a bit of a smaller following creates, advocacy and affinity with your brand later on, right? Because you've created a good experience in working with them. We have our industry practitioners who have very, very, very deep expertise. There was a couple years ago, I was working on a program that was medical device and medical drug testing, and they wanted to work with influencers. And a lot of our influencers were scientists, right? So that could be those people that really have that deep expertise that your marketing team might not have. And it's good to partner with them because it adds additional credibility to the content you're creating. And then you have your social amplifiers. So these are people that, again, have some expertise. They have really crazy networks. They share a lot. They're good at driving people to the content that you're creating, right? If you think about kind of bundling these different types of influencers together. And then you have your internal experts, and that's going to be an SME or an executive from your organization. And by surrounding them with these other influencer types, it adds credibility, builds thought leadership, all of these things that you're looking to do for your brand. And then there's also prospects and customers that you can include in content, right? If you include customers, it helps the people you're trying to reach see themselves in the content you're creating. And prospects, again, it's a good way to warm up that relationship. So I think we have a tendency as an industry to want to go after the professional influencers and the social amplifiers only. They are great people to work with, but you want to think about who else you're including in the content so that you're giving your audience what they need. So I also asked a few influencers why they don't partner with specific brands. And again, this was specifically to B2B influencers that I'm aware of that I've worked with. And no mutual value exchange is the number one thing, right? So it's important that you understand who your influencers are before you reach out to them. There's also a question about a lack of compensation. So I am someone who very firmly believes that an organic relationship with an influencer, with an expert, is very, very important, but I also think that you need to compensate them fairly for the work that they're doing, right? There needs to be that mutual exchange of value. There's also a lot that say, they don't really share my point of view. So it's our job as marketers to ensure that the people we're reaching out to, we have a good understanding of who they are, what motivates them, what they care about, and then determine if that aligns with what our brand cares about. And then also not familiar with the brand. So I think that that last one is easier to overcome, as you can do some things to warm up these relationships. Like I said, you can create a blog post featuring influencers where you don't ask anything of them, right? You're just saying these are people to look out for. Here are some of their more recent content. You can nurture them on social. There's a lot of different things that you can do to overcome that familiarity with your brand that don't take a ton of lift and a ton of effort. And on that note of finding alignment, I think it's critical to understand not what is the content that they post, but who else do they engage with? What topics are they posting about most recently? And then what does their audience look like? Is their audience made up of the right people that you're trying to reach? If they have only consultants that care about, I don't know, the Kardashians, that's probably not a fit for you, right? You want to make sure that the roles and the topics and the things that they care about is aligned. And then yes, digging into their content a little bit further to see exactly what they're posting about on a regular basis. And this is just an example from our tool, Analytica, that kind of digs into what one of the influencers' profiles might look like and how you can search the content. So on the flip side of this, why do influencers partner with brands? So brand affinity and the experience that you create is critically important to success. Like there is no replacement for that. Knowing that you're creating a good experience, it doesn't feel like a transactional approach. And then obviously exposure, what is the influencer getting out of it? Are you a well-recognized brand potentially that they want to partner with, that they want to be affiliated with? Are you compensating them fairly? And then are the other people that are involved in this interesting or attractive to them as well, right? Who else are you surrounding these influencer partners with? One of the other things too that it's unfortunate that we still have to be talking about this is that we want to build a diverse and inclusive community of influencers as well. A lot of times that takes an extra attention, maybe a different way of searching for them so that you can find the people that yes, are the kind of usual suspects that come up when you search for a specific topic, but who are the other people that have an interesting story to tell? Because that might not always come out in their social content. So that requires digging a little bit further to make sure that you're finding a whole bunch of people that can help your community, your target audience, see themselves in the content. You want people to feel fairly represented and a part of this, right? You want to be inclusive, not exclusive. And this is an example of a recent asset that we created with our client Tapalti on the future of finance. This project took us, I think, probably about 3 or 4 months from start to finish. We had a combination of influencer videos and static content. We had a bunch of different types of people as well included in this. We had some big names in the industry. We had an internal expert. We had, again, just all sorts of different perspectives to include. And again, it included, one person per section did a short, 1 to 2 minute video. And then we had these other pieces as well as some recommended reading. And this was, I think, a great way to showcase these different voices. We're not talking about just finance technology and why you should buy it. We're talking about what is the future of finance? How do you build a successful finance team? How do you integrate tech? Yes, but what does that look like and how can we create that value for our audience? So again, this isn't an advertisement for the company, it's a piece of useful content. So integrating efforts across teams. This is one of the toughest questions to answer, and there's not one right answer. So when it comes to who should own influencer marketing, it sits in a lot of different places. Sometimes it's with social, sometimes it's with content, sometimes it's with brand, sometimes it's with analyst relations. There are so many different options, but it seems like it can get really messy really fast because we have all of these different silos that don't always work together depending on the size of our organization. However, I'm not saying that influencer marketing is above all of these things. I'm just saying that it integrates with all of them, right? So it doesn't matter as much which department owns it as long as that department is integrating with the other teams. Because a lot of times people will come to us and say, we want to do influencer marketing. We don't have access to social though, we only have access to the website. So we can create stuff, but we can't promote it. Or the flip side of that, we can only do things on social, we can't publish things on the website. And how do we get over that, right? And that part of that is figuring out how best to integrate with these teams. And we have a lot of clients that are have been, as of late, we've been working on creating some playbooks for them so that you're able to centralize at least the knowledge of what it is that you're trying to achieve and who the people are to go to within that team to start an influencer marketing program. I anticipate, in probably 5 or 6 more years, we'll have more heads of global influencer marketing like Ursula Ringham at SAP, but that role doesn't exist in a lot of companies right now, and it'll be a while. So in the meantime, I think it's kind of figuring out where should that live, and then how do you share that information across your organization. And this is a recent study from Top Rank Marketing, where I actually used to work for a while, and they did a recent study on prioritizing internal influence. And this is from B2B marketers specifically, indicating why they're working with internal experts as part of their program. So the first 2 largest ones were building social influence for the executive and building credibility with customers as the 2 top targets for the program. But then also creating relationships between the executives and the influencers, utilizing executives and content, and then building credibility to increase sales, right? So these are the top reasons that most B2B brands are looking to include internal influencers as part of their program. And this is an example of what can happen if you are able to do that effectively. So it might not look on the surface like your executive or SME has a great social following, but are they connected with the right people? Are they sharing content from the right people? Is there engagement back and forth? And how can you look to build that for them? This is an example of an executive from a B2B tech company who, again, on the surface doesn't have a ton of followers or connections, but is actually is connected with the right people and is able to have a lot of impact. This is an example of over 6 months, how he was able to drive 20,000 engagements on 4,000 posts across multiple channels. And it's insane, right? And that was just on Twitter, right? There's also LinkedIn to take into account. But this is something you need to be monitoring, measuring, figuring out how you integrate SMEs and executives into your program. And then there's also what we like to call the buddy system. So again, depending on the size of your org, a lot of you might have SME, thought leadership, executive programs, and then you're also exploring influencer marketing. And the 2 should be connected, right? On their own, they work great. Together, they work much better. And this is another example from a recent event where on this side we have the external influencers that the client had partnered with for the event. And this is just the number of posts. This has nothing to do with impressions, reach, engagements. This is just the number of times that they posted. And on the other side, you'll see the internal experts, right? So we were also tracking people that work at the brand that were attending the event and seeing how they were helping to promote as well. So again, individually, there's great stuff here, but together, the results are insanely elevated, right? And also connecting these 2 groups together is really important. So yes, it's great if they're posting on their own, but how can you get them to engage with each other, which helps boost the content even more? And this is another example of how you might do that. So down here in the blue, we have employees, right, as influencers, as internal experts, coupled with our external experts, right? So in kind of figuring out which of your internal employees do you want to map to specific experts. Let's say you want to get them connected, have them start promoting. I was speaking with someone yesterday during office hours who was saying, we have a few people on our team that are influential, that are social, they speak at events, they're an influencer, right? Like, yeah, who else can you connect them with? How can you start building up their profile as someone who is associated with the brand and get them to engage with those people, to create content with them? Maybe they interview them. Maybe they have a few exchanges on social media, because that helps to add that face to the brand as well, which goes back to that building credibility and trust. And then another important factor is how they influence each other, right? So not just you're pushing out content, you're engaging people, great. Are you engaging the right people? If your target is the C-suite, are either your internal or external experts actually engaging with them? Is there something that you can show that they are working together, that it's not just, again, pushing out content, there's engagement back and forth with the people you're trying to reach? And this is another example from our client Equinix, who had never done influencer marketing in any real capacity before. And one of the first things that we did was a LinkedIn Live. And as part of this, we featured Leanne, who was their internal person who acted as the host. And then we had 2 other experts, analysts that are really, really knowledgeable on this topic, to start talking about the top trends, challenges, opportunities impacting digital leaders across the world. And this was a result of a recent report they'd run. And so we briefed the influencers, we went through the survey results, and then we hosted this LinkedIn Live that was about 34 minutes or so. And based on the benchmarks, I mean, look at this. We were over 200% above our views. That was an average for them, 15,000% above comments, and then 133% above their shares, right? Had we not included influencers in this type of piece of content and just posted some things on social, pushing out the report, we absolutely 100% would not have gotten this engagement. We also were able to include a link to the report in the live, and that was one of the top drivers of content or of views to that piece of content that was gated because it was a report. But again, had we not done this, those results would not have been possible. Gaining executive buy-in is another really big one, especially right now, especially for those who are trying to test. And this was a question, again, I asked people that specifically I knew had integrated with influencers, had followed them, in some way worked with them in order to understand how that impacted the decision. So 53% said they became aware of a brand, which again, if we think back to why people are working with influencers, awareness and exposure is the top reason they're looking to, so good news there. 28% said they considered a product, 8% said they made a purchase, and 11% said they recommended a brand, which that one I thought was really interesting. So did you make a purchase and recommend? Or did you see something you thought was interesting and you recommended that brand to another person, right? Because you felt like it was credible because of the content you'd seen between the brand and the influencer. And another thing to get buy-in, 100%, is to plan for what it is that you want to achieve, right? Are you looking to increase your share of voice, right? Are you looking for increased awareness? Do you want more visitors to your website? Do you want a more engaged social audience? Do you want to generate leads, right? All of these things are things to consider before you start, because this will be very critical to your executives, to your C-suite, to understand why you want to do it, why it's important. And from there, measuring your programs, right? Being able to actually show impact of the things that you achieved. And again, every program is a little bit different, but you want to make sure that you're setting yourself up to track before you publish so that you can successfully manage these things, right? You want to know how many engagements were there, what does the trend look like? And then ultimately being able to make those data-driven decisions. So once you've measured, taking a look back and saying, okay, how do we want to optimize this program? Just as you would with any other marketing program. How do we want to optimize this? Who are the influencers that drove the most traffic, the most traction? What are the things that we have lined up in the future that we want to work on them with? And how do we just continually evolve what it is that we're doing? So, what happens now is the question. I want to leave you with 3 questions to ask yourself. First one being, are you pursuing influencer marketing for the right reasons? Or is it maybe just something that seems interesting, that might be kind of one of those shiny objects right now? Are you doing it for the right reasons? Do you know what you want to achieve as part of this? Do you know what success looks like? In the end, does that mean that you have 175 more people registered for your event, that you're able to capture 35% more leads? What does that look like in the context of your current marketing plan? And then do you have the tech, tools, and processes to scale it effectively? And again, this one is tough because not everyone could go invest in the people, the tech, all of it right up front, but it's a matter of starting slow, figuring out who the right partners are or who the right members of your team are to help execute this successfully. Whew, we did it. We made it through, all of us together. Thank you. So just as a final call to action, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, send me an email. I know I talked very fast. I went through a lot very quickly. LinkedIn me. We do have a live streaming B2B influencer marketing event this November, so feel free to talk to me or one of my teammates about it. We also have a booth in the expo hall. And then as a huge favor, if you have 5 minutes, we have a new survey that's going out. We want your insights. We want you to help shape what it is that the future of B2B social media looks like. And so again, if you have a chance, please go ahead and fill it out. And I think that's it for me, unless there's any questions.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we do have some time for Q&A. If we could, we've got a couple in the room. I'm gonna grab one online if I could real quick while we have them, because everybody here will be able to join Ashley outside for the post-presentation huddle after. So Megan's gonna take this first question from online.
Yes, our virtual audience would like to know, are influencers include authoritative organizations who don't want to show bias toward vendors? Also, some industries are notoriously difficult to get what could be perceived as endorsements. Think information privacy and security. Any tips?
So we work in a lot of regulated industries, and that is tough. And even just working with analysts from some of the big firms can be really tough because they don't want to be seen as biased. So one of the things that I would always recommend is there's going to be some people that are off limits just because of the rules and regulations, but you're not looking necessarily for influencers to endorse you. You're looking to co-create content with them that has value to your audience, right? And it's a matter too of sometimes whether you're paying them or not, being able to absolutely be clear about the fact that it is sponsored, that it is a partnership that is paid. A lot of our clients in the financial industry run into that, and you just have to be careful in some of those more highly regulated industries, but that doesn't mean you can't work with them. And I think the first part of the question was, did you say around, it wasn't individuals, but organizations that don't want to be named as endorsing, or what was that part? Towards vendors. It's tough. I say, find the people in the organization that it does make sense to work with, and partners are a great option as influencers, but you might need to look outside of that if it is, more highly regulated.
Great, thank you. Chris?
How do you negotiate the ownership of intellectual property when you're co-creating with influencers? Because a lot of influencers post stuff on like their YouTube channel or their LinkedIn. Who owns that, and how do you contractually decide who owns what?
Thanks for the softball, Chris. So it depends. So a lot of times it depends on, for our clients, what their preference is. A lot of times it will be written into the contract that the company owns the content. However, more than happy to provide the influencers with that content to use as well. So it might just be that perhaps it's co-branded. So let's say you did a LinkedIn Live or a video interview. Happy to share that content with you, but having it go through brand first to make sure all of that is taken care of is important. And then there's other clients that don't really mind, right? It's not specifically written into the contract, but if you have a strong opinion on it, include it in the contract.
Cool. Got time for another one? Ladies first.
So I'm in demand gen, and so of course everything I do has to come back to leads and volume. What's your advice for somebody who wants to get into influencer marketing, but they know that they, at the end of the day, have to produce leads out of it?
I think the two most important things to think about are what tactics are you deploying with influencers and what types of influencers are you partnering with. So it could be that maybe you have a bunch of partners or customers that you want to create a deeper level piece of content with that's actually intended to drive leads. Something that is, future of finance is not a lead generator, right? That's just to build awareness. So I think it's really critical to decide who you're working with, what you're doing, and then making sure you're tracking all the way through to conversion. So yes, these influencers drove this many people, but how many converted actually on your website? Did they actually become an MQL? Did they download a gated piece of content? It can be tricky, but it's not impossible.
Awesome, thank you. Folks, we are at the end of our time together. Let's put our hands together for this fabulous presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ashley, and thank you all for being here.